Welcome to Grief in the Room. In this podcast, we do a deep dive into all things grief, so that when those themes of grief and loss show up in your client's story, you're prepared with the insight, tools, and most importantly, confidence to give them the kind of support they need. Grief in the Room is presented by Martin Ruddis and Trudy Bamford, grief trainers and advocates, and good friends. We bring warmth, humanity, and humour to this subject, and we're so glad you're joining our conversation today. Please do subscribe to and say hello to us in the comments.
So I think a little bit like the last episode that we did with Evie about her story, and sort of introducing a different theme of grief that perhaps listeners might not have considered. This episode is going to be particularly different because in this episode I have decided to tell the listeners a little bit of my backstory. It feels important for me to maybe talk a little bit about my story and what I've learned from it, so that our listeners understand if they are supporting someone who has left a high control religion, a cult, a coercive background of anything like that, that they will be experiencing a significant grief reaction that is multi-layered and that may go on for a very, very, very long time. We're talking a lot of trauma here, whether you voluntarily leave or whether you are put outside without your choice. This is something that people don't know very much about unless you have lived experience of this kind of thing. It's something that's not very well understood, and I'm supporting clients. I'm supporting clients at the moment who have gone through sort of similar circumstances, and they are lucky that they've been assigned to me randomly, and I've got lived experience. Because I've heard plenty of other experiences from people who've left high control religions, who've gone to therapists, and the therapists simply do not understand. As far as they're concerned, once you've left, all of your problems are solved.
And I suppose I understand more because we've known each other for a couple and a half years, 3 years probably, through our volunteer training journey and through our business endeavours with Grief Guides, and also as partners. So I'm hearing a lot more about this. And I have to say, the more I hear from you, the more I understand. And it was a little bit about when we spoke to Julia Bueno with baby loss. The different layers and levels of grief were intense, but the layers and levels of grief that you've been experiencing in the short journey that I've known you have been really intense. You've been officially outside of the Jehovah's Witness since when?
Well, officially, I don't think I am officially outside of it.
Just explain that a little bit.
I mean, where do I even start? I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness.
So you were born in?
And I was born in. My dad was an elder, so he was, he had a lot of responsibility. So our family was sort of looked up to. And I would say that I was probably the poster child. I was the daughter, I was the wife that everybody kind of looked up to as being what's known as an exemplary witness. So, I my entire life revolved around it, and I was a very good girl. I never did anything wrong.
And can I just say that you actually absolutely believed in it at that
absolutely.
time? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And very much did so until a few years ago. And I am aware that even though I've done a huge amount of work, a huge amount of therapeutic work, and a lot of kind of deprogramming, just this conversation alone is causing significant amounts of distress.
Yeah.
Because you are trained not to question and you're trained not to criticize. And so to actually be saying anything publicly that is negative, I am finding really, really difficult. I feel like I'm letting everybody down, which is which is a little bit crazy, but
So,
that's the programming. That's the level of programming.
and it is programming. It's, some other people may say brainwashing.
It just goes to show that it doesn't matter how much time passes and how much work you do and how much deprogramming you do, that it's just like an archaeological dig. There's just layer after layer after layer after layer.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is why it's so important for therapists to understand the complexity of it.
Can I just put a timeline to this? So
Mm-hmm.
we met online, um, 3 years ago now, perhaps?
Yep. Yep. 3 years ago. Yep.
3 years ago, where were you at with your,
I had already left by then. So
you'd left, but you were still,
I had stopped being an active witness. I wasn't officially out. I'm still not officially out.
yeah,
I was just not active. But I was still married to somebody who was very much active and still living with them. So I was sort of living a kind of a shadowy half life, really, where I wasn't out, but I was also wasn't in.
okay. We'll talk about the cognitive dissonance of that later, I'm sure. But so you were not an active witness, so you weren't attending meetings, you weren't expected to witness, so your life as a witness had effectively stopped, and that was post COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, so up until COVID,
Yeah,
I was very active. I was very much a believer,
yeah,
and every choice that I made
mm-hmm.
was based around what was expected of me.
Sure,
And then COVID happened,
yeah,
and uh, so the way that high control religions work is they
mm-hmm.
keep you so busy that you do not have time to think. Because if you don't have time to think, you don't have time to question anything.
Yeah,
And when lockdown happened and we stopped being able to go to meetings in person and we
mm-hmm.
stopped going preaching from door to door,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden we stepped off the hamster wheel and I
Mm-hmm.
had time to think for the
Mm-hmm.
first time. And I was in my kind of mid 40s at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And the process of what is known as waking up started for me. Ironically, during lockdown, as with lots of other people,
Mm-hmm.
I got a dog. It was my first dog,
Mm-hmm.
and I fell madly in love with this dog.
Mm-hmm.
My very much beloved Bertie, who I've got tattooed on my hand. And I didn't have children. That was one of the things that was sort of discouraged, was having children. So we chose not to have children, and that's one of the things that I've had to grieve since, because now I'm too old to have children.
Can I just,
Um,
oh, go on, carry on your story, and I'll ask a question.
so we got Bertie, and I fell hugely in love with him, and I would have protected him from anything. And it made me think, hang on, if I'd had children, if I feel this way about a dog, if I'd had children, how much more would I have felt about a child? And then I started to reason, hang on a minute, we're being told that God sees us as beloved children. And yet I'm also being told that he is about to kill billions and billions of people, and the only people that he's going to let live are Jehovah's Witnesses. He's going to kill billions of children and billions of adults. I can't, that makes no sense to me anymore. And then I started to see people differently. I remember going to the supermarket and looking around me and thinking, nobody here deserves to die. I can't, this makes no sense to me. I can't believe this anymore. Why do I get to live, but you're all about to be killed? That makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So that was where the crack came in for me. That was where the crack came in.
Bertie.
And then, yeah, I didn't believe it. And worse still, I could see how incredibly damaging it was and how the havoc it was wreaking and
Mm-hmm.
had wreaked in the lives of the people in my own family,
Mm-hmm.
in the lives of the people that I cared about. And all of a sudden, I was faced with this awful choice, this kind of Sophie's choice of, do I stay? do I carry on going along with it and not disrupt my life and not disrupt my marriage? Because my husband was an elder at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Or do I walk away and not be part of this continual awful cycle of damage?
That's big. That's a lot.
Yeah, it
Did
was a lot. And I grappled with that for about a year,
okay.
all through
Uh,
COVID, really.
and so you were ostracized from community. You were, you
Not at
know,
that point. At that point, I was what is known as physically in, mentally out. So I was still going along to meetings on Zoom. My husband knew what was going on, but nobody else knew what was going on.
mm,
Um, and I was trying to figure out, I was trying to kind of rationalize, can I live with, basically, can I live with the guilt of this? Can I live with the guilt of knowing that I am being part of something that is destroying people's lives?
that waking up must have been quite terrifying. And where did you get support from uh, at that time?
I had a therapist. I had a therapist who was amazing, who had been my therapist for a long time.
Okay,
And it wasn't until quite far into my journey that she actually revealed to me that she had a similar story. She had been a Seventh-day Adventist, which is a
right,
very similar kind of background.
right,
So I was incredibly lucky that I was being supported by somebody who had her own lived experience and could see the kind of ramifications for me. Because a therapist that didn't have that, it
mm,
might seem a very simple thing, a little bit like, do I leave a bad relationship? It seems
mm,
as simple as that. But I think if you've got the lived experience, you realize, oh, it's not as simple as that because we're talking huge existential questions. Because any kind of high control religion,
mm,
all of your choices are pretty much made for you. Your identity is formed for you.
mm,
You don't have your own identity. You have a kind of a hive identity. Your purpose is given to you. You
mm,
don't have to worry about any of life's big questions like, why is there so much suffering in the world?
mm,
What happens to us when we die? Am I ever going to see my family members who've died again? All
mm,
of these kind of huge existential questions wouldn't necessarily occur to you. You would just look at the circumstances and think, okay, you're not happy with that situation, leave, start again. Oh, good, you've left, you've started again. It's all
mm.
sorted out now.
So just setting the scene. If I asked you to paint a picture for us of what life felt like inside the community as a child, what did belonging mean in that world?
So everything was rule based and very, very, um,
So high coercive control, I suppose. What we're saying, you were told what to think, told what to do, told what to believe.
yeah. And I think one of the things that is very difficult about any kind of coercive control, whether that is an organization or a relationship, is that you are being told that it's being done in the name of love,
Yes.
but it's actually being done out of fear. And I think that level of cognitive dissonance does very bad things to your brain, especially when you're a child. I've
Mm,
got a colleague who specializes in supporting people who've left Jehovah's Witnesses, and she's doing her PhD on this, that it's a very different experience if you was raised in it as a child and left than if you converted as an adult and then left, because you've never known anything different.
sure.
And you are being told that as long as you follow all of these rules and fit this criteria, you are loved and you will be safe. And everything is done out of love. If somebody is disfellowshipped and shunned, it's done because we love you. We
Right.
are no longer going to speak to you because we love you.
Right.
It's a
Right.
manifestation of our love for you.
Okay.
You can imagine how much that messes people up.
Yeah, very much so.
But actually, of course, it's all completely fear-based.
And that's and that's part of the culture of high control groups.
You were told everything you did, every time that you carried out a rule, no matter how awful it felt, you're doing it because you love that person.
Okay.
Um, so yeah.
So I mean, your assumptive world was pretty much painted for you and locked in at a very, very, very early age, and it's the impact of that assumptive world breaking, no matter how it broke, again, is particularly severe for you because you're a woman, and that's a very patriarchal structure and society as well. And you're married to an elder.
Yeah, it was deeply, deeply programmed. I can't even tell you how deeply programmed that if you are part of an eldest family, you are carrying a really important responsibility. My identity as an elder's daughter, let
Yeah.
alone an elder's wife, was my entire identity. That was my purpose in life, was to be a good elder's daughter, a good elder's wife. So I wasn't just breaking apart my world and starting again. I was very aware that I was breaking apart my husband's world too, because it meant that he had to give up his role as an elder, and that was what he lived for.
Okay. All right. So you had your therapist. What other support did you have? What about online community?
That was incredibly important. So there's an XJW Reddit group, and I was hugely supported by them, hugely so. And I used to spend a lot of time deprogramming myself on that group. They played a huge role. They didn't, they won't necessarily know that they played a huge role, but they did. Um, but apart from that, I just basically had to grapple with it on my own.
And then, kind of a timeline-ish, once this awakening happened and this perception change in your assumptions were shattered, and then you were starting to rebuild your assumptive world, and it's, brick by brick and very, very slowly, you had signed up to college by then, or to become a counsellor, or you chose to do that?
Yeah, I don't think I was building my assumptive world back up then. I think that there was a whole gap where it felt like I had left this identity, but I had absolutely no idea who I was or what I was going to do with the rest of my life. There's like this kind of blank space of I don't know what to do. That's when we met, because then I trained for crews and learnt about grief. But ironically, it didn't even occur to me at the time that what I was going through was very much grief related.
And we could say ambiguous loss, we can say disenfranchised grief, and the people that are listening to this and know what we do, we've explored and unpacked these words and terms. Ambiguous loss, the loss that occurs without closure or clear understanding. And disenfranchised grief, because as you've said, therapists, unless your therapist had her particular lived experience and insights, nobody's died. So why are you going through grief? Society is not validating your loss.
And then I had to go through, I think we've talked before a little bit about historic grief, where you haven't grieved at the time, but you grieve when something brings the grief up. I literally had to grieve for my whole family, because at this point, both my brother, my sister, and both my parents had died, but I had not grieved for them at the time that they died because of the belief system. The belief system was I was going to see them again. And then I had to face the fact, okay, I don't believe that anymore. So all of a sudden, now I've got this entire family that I hadn't grieved for, with the added layer of my brother and sister. I had shunned them when they had been put outside the faith. I had shunned them. So I had to deal with all of the guilt around that as well.
And the shunning is when someone leaves, you're instructed as a Jehovah's Witness to avoid even a simple greeting, and that's immediate family members. That's everybody. Just that's it.
Yeah.
And what about, you didn't believe that you were going to meet them again, but what about also the narrative that you knew full well that once you have left, what's going to happen to your future post-biological death and such like?
Funnily enough, that never bothered me. I know it bothers some. I've had conversations with my niece. My own mortality never bothered me. Um,
And just for clarity's sake, your niece is now left as well,
my niece has now left,
and she is shunned.
and she is being shunned.
Yeah.
And it's partly for her story and her husband's story, because he's going through it as well, that
Mm-hmm.
I am digging quite deeply to do this series of these two podcasts, because
Mm,
she went overnight from having a really loving family to
mm,
having absolutely no contact with anybody.
mm,
And I can't even tell you the damage that does to somebody, that if you are told your whole life that your community is your family, they're
mm,
your brothers and sisters, and that they love you very, very much, and that
mm.
you are safe, but overnight you lose everybody. The damage that does, unfortunately, um, is can be catastrophic, especially for some young ones that don't have. This is the other thing, you see, because you are excluded from contact with the outside world, or discouraged from contact, really.
Mm,
Most people don't build up a support network in advance.
mm,
So they're walking away to nothing.
mm,
They're walking away to nothing with all these existential things to grapple with,
mm.
and sadly, that results in suicide for many.
Um, and I know we've spoken a lot about this because we're both very much engaged in suicide prevention, prevention, and intervention work. And just back to the community, then, with your personal circumstances, you lived in a tiny village in the middle of nowhere with a strong community, and the community, your world was Jehovah's Witnesses. And so when it became aware that you were out of the group, you weren't shunned, but you weren't welcomed either. Is that right?
Yeah, I kind of slipped through the net. I didn't officially leave, and I didn't do that because I didn't want to cause my husband more distress than was necessary. But
Mm,
so I wasn't officially shunned. I still haven't been, and enough time has probably passed now that I won't be. Although it's possible that one of the consequences of this podcast might be something like that. But whether you're officially shunned or not, you are no longer seen as somebody to mix with.
mm,
And it was really, really difficult, because I loved a lot of these people. I still
mm,
love a lot of these people.
mm,
Um, and yeah, to go overnight from somebody that they saw as a good person to
mm,
somebody that they consider to be so bad
mm,
that if I was to die tomorrow, they believe God would not bring me back to life, but I
mm.
would be destroyed eternally. That's how bad I'm seen to be now. Um, is yeah, I remember somebody who I considered to be my best friend.
Mm.
Her response to me was, "You've chosen to be ruled by Satan."
And okay, so it's not just you've left, but you are now under the control of an evil influence per se as
Yep.
well, and you are damned, damned, and damned again.
Therefore, um, I'm considered to be a corrupting influence. So yeah, I would be strongly avoided at best.
So fast forward a couple of years, you've been outside now. You've still not been shunned because you've not openly opposed or criticized or publicly criticized the religion. You've now left and you're rebuilding. You're rebuilding. What's that been like?
This is the thing with grief, isn't it? Grief is a sneaky bitch.
Mm.
And
Love that podcast, by the way, Lisa Favreau.
yeah, I think that even now, um, stuff sneaks up on me that I don't expect.
Mm.
Um, we've been talking about doing this podcast for ages and ages, and I really wanted to do it, but I
Mm-hmm.
have been having a massive, massive, massive wobble this morning about doing it because it's touching all kinds of painful stuff, and that's what grief is like, isn't it? That's what happens to us.
It is indeed.
This is why it's really important for therapists to understand this. It's counterintuitive that something that should be positive is actually really, really difficult, but it is. And I suppose, it's the dual process, isn't it? It's the dual process that the
Mm-hmm.
rebuilding work is as stressful as the loss oriented work. It's a little bit like being an alien in a human world. I don't, there is so much I don't know about anything. You know, I, I, I remember the first time they sang Happy Birthday at college, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
We have so many moments where we have firsts when we're together. Like if we're in a pub and we clink our glasses together and say
Yep.
cheers, you still have a moment.
I do, even though they've recently changed the rules, so Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to do that now. But it's stupid things, or it feels like stupid things,
Mm-hmm.
like not being able to make decisions about seemingly insignificant things. That's something that you wouldn't really understand unless you had been raised in a high control environment where everything has a kind of a prescription. Whatever choice you're making, you
Mm-hmm.
have rules that you can refer to, um, and you don't make individual choices really, or it feels like there's huge consequences for your choices. And so, just starting again and having complete freedom,
Mm-hmm.
I can now live my life according to what matters to me. But what matters to me? I'm figuring that out at 49 years old. What are
Yeah.
my values? How
Yeah.
many of my values are introjected values, which is what has been handed over to you? How
Mm-hmm.
many of them are actually my values?
Mm.
What matters to me? Who am I?
And you're finding that out on a daily basis. You're finding that out on a daily basis, and I see that and I witness that. Clearly, I do. Um, and you're tackling this from a perspective of actually you are now a non-believer and you have chosen to leave. So you're rebuilding your structures and your beliefs and values. So you're rebuilding that assumptive world again. And sometimes that's as simple as ordering something that you weren't allowed to eat before, like black pudding.
Yeah. That was quite hard.
It was a hard moment, wasn't it?
It was a hard moment. Yeah, it was. And yeah, it's little things like that. The other day, the door knocked and it was two Mormons, and I had a complete wobble. I had a
What
complete wobble.
what did that wobble look like?
I wanted to chase them down the street. I shut the door in their face, and then I felt really bad because I remember what that felt like to have that done to you. And I wanted to chase them down the street and explain and tell them my story and tell them to go on Reddit and that they were in a cult. And it was a whole thing. I didn't do any of that, by the way,
That's what you wanted to do, but
but it's
that's
what I
not.
wanted to do.
And when we've seen Jehovah's Witnesses with the trolley on the street, again, when we first used to see them, it was with high awareness, and then when we spot them, it's like we have extrasensory perception of them as well. We feel them before we see them. The last time we saw a couple, I think it was in Manchester, your reaction was very much different again. It wasn't as intense, but again, you did say, I don't think you even wanted to go up and try and say anything to them either, did you, this time?
No, I wouldn't bother. There's no point. I wouldn't have listened. You're
If
trained not to listen. So you trained you never listen to an apostate. An apostate is somebody who leaves. I will be now officially labeled an apostate for doing this podcast. It's
Okay.
somebody who leaves and speaks out against the organization. You don't ever listen to an apostate. So I would never. But yeah, it does make me wobble a little bit to see them. And part of that wobble is that it brings up a lot of guilt.
Guilt for what you did.
Yeah, a lot of guilt for the things that I went along with, that I can't undo.
Because you didn't make the decisions, because obviously your role didn't allow you to have the power, but you enacted the decisions and you followed through on this. If someone was shunned, then you would shun them.
Yeah,
That's what you're referring to now.
it is people that I loved.
People that you loved. And what about the people that are disfellowshipped? Is that right?
Yep, yep.
That still believe.
So that would be the case for my brother. So, and we've spoken about my brother in previous podcasts, haven't we? He was
Mm-hmm.
17 when he was disfellowshipped for smoking. He was
Smoking
kicked out the house,
cigarettes.
smoking cigarettes. He was kicked out the house. He was homeless. He became a heroin addict. He was
Mm.
shunned. He believed that it was still the true religion until he died, and that is, I can't imagine anything worse than that. I can understand why it drove him to heroin, let's put it that way, because he believed that he deserved everything he got and he'd lost everybody and it was his own fault. So of course he went down a self-destructive spiral. And I think of all of the things that is hardest, that I regret the most, it's probably that I can't have a conversation with him.
Mm.
I delivered some free sort of training to faith to faithless, and if anybody wants to know a little bit more about high control religions or wants to be able to point their clients in the direction of support, Faith to Faithless is the organisation to do that. It's linked up to Humanists UK.
Mm-hmm.
It's a charity that supports people who've left high control religions and cults. And I delivered some training for them
Mm.
on the role of grief. And the grief in that room um, was it was visceral because it's a living death.
Mm.
You've lost everybody that you know, but they are still there.
Mm.
You're moving through the world like a ghost,
Mm.
and I was able to leave my environment, so I no longer see the people. But for those years that I was there, I would see them, and they didn't ignore me. People said hello to me, but if I'd been disfellowshipped, they wouldn't have even looked in my direction. And so a lot of the people that were at the Faith to Faithless event, they were dealing with that they were still seeing on a daily basis all the people that they loved,
Mm.
but they were invisible. And that is a living grief that and a living trauma that it cannot be put into words.
So this is how we've got to this episode. And I don't know if it's the appropriate time now, but in the next episode, we're going to aim that more about, we're shifting from your personal lived experience, obviously still is foundational, to more clinically exploring what friends, family and therapists and communities really need to understand to truly support someone through this complex grief. Because like you say, it's not just about getting over leaving a religion, it's about surviving and reconstructing your entire world.
And
Is there
your
anything?
identity.
And your identity.
That's key.
Yeah. So, from a personal note, for you, what are the actual ramifications of you doing this now?
I don't know is the truth.
Okay. What could they be?
Um, they could be that I'm considered to have spoken out enough that the local Jehovah's Witness congregation will try and find me and take some action. I don't think that will happen. I think enough time has passed that I'm no longer considered to be an active witness, but that is possible.
And when you say action,
Um,
what do you mean? What type of action?
I would be disfellowshipped.
Yeah, but what? I mean, they'll knock on your door and pull you out and
I would
stand you in front
be,
of a bunch of elders and like
yeah,
a court. And well,
yeah.
they wouldn't do that, obviously, because you don't have to go, do you?
Well, if I didn't go, they would just disfellowship me in default, whether you go or not. Doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
Um, I'm not concerned about that. My concern is still really that I very much hold the religion responsible for the damage rather than the people.
Okay.
And I am aware that I didn't leave for me. I have rebuilt my life for me, but I didn't leave for me. I left because I couldn't be part of something that was hurting people, especially young people. And I'm doing this podcast for the same reason. I'm doing it against my own programming, really. But I'm doing it because I am hearing too many stories of the damage, and it's important to put voice to those stories so that people know just how traumatic it is and the potential of damage there is, and that it isn't just as simple as walking away.
Part 2, as we've explained, is we're going to look at more of the clinical side of the impact of this, of living with this loss. What else are we going to do? What else are we planning to do? We're in terms of helping people educate therapists and such like. The pod's what we do for therapists and for anyone really. But
I think, yeah, this episode was more kind of laying the groundwork as to my story and why we're doing it. In part 2, we're going to be bringing it back very specifically to grief and sharing some resources as well, because at the moment, in my work of supporting people bereaved by suicide, I am supporting people at the moment who have left different religions, and we are kind of unpicking that as part of their grief story, because it does activate a lot of things. So it is something that is going to be coming up, very, very much so. It's just like any kind of grief, it's going to be presented in the room. So it's important that anybody supporting somebody, whether that is as a therapist or whether it is as some kind of support staff, can see the different ways that it could manifest.
thank you for joining our conversation today. This episode of Grief in the Room was presented by Martin Roddis and Trudy Bamford.